Good morning. So I'm kind of wondering how Brent does it because there's so many different things that you could talk about, and so just trying to pick a topic and come up with something for that just seems like a huge task in itself. But as I look out there today, I see pretty much all familiar faces, and so that should help me with the anxiety up here a little bit, and so I appreciate that. This is actually 2.0 for my sermon today because as I was trying to pick a topic and I started doing it all, getting ready for today, I just prayed and asked God to, give me some direction, let me know if that's what I was going, and I ended up just looking back at, the last month or so of my life and was like, well, that's pretty much a good lineup of a topic to discuss this morning. So today's sermon is really a walk in my shoes this past month. But like most people, as a child, I was asked to do things like pick up my stuff, wash the dishes, and take out the trash. There's really three reasons why any of these things got completed. One was because I wanted to be helpful and show love and support. The second reason was because I wanted the reward. So that could be classified a little bit as selfishly motivated, but it was nice to receive the appreciation from helping out. And the third thing was actually, I either wanted to, I didn't want to, or it was because I said so. I either did it because I wanted to be helpful and show love and support, or get a reward, selfishly motivated, or receive appreciation, or I didn't want to because I had better things to do or didn't feel like doing it. But the third thing, because I said so, I knew had repercussions. So using this, I thought about where was Jesus when his father asked him to do something. We've all seen the movie, or heard of the movie and all the stories of heaven is real. And heaven is basically love. And in 1 Corinthians 13, we can see what love is. It suffers long, which is a fancy way of saying it's patient. It does not envy. It doesn't parade itself. It's not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. It thinks no evil. It does not rejoice in iniquity, but it does rejoice in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. So if you think about love and heaven, that sounds like an amazing place. And when we think of heaven, we get all these images of love, and to be able to partake in that for eternity is just what we're all here striving for. But there's also biblical descriptions of heaven. In John 14, we see that it has many mansions. In Hebrews, we see that it was built to worship God. And then in Revelations, we see that it's to worship Jesus. It's filled with peace, joy, and praise. It's adorned with precious gemstones, pearly gates, and streets of gold. And it has the tree of life, and there's no more night. Sounds like a pretty good place. And this is our reward. Have you ever considered that Jesus left that behind to come down and do what his Father wanted him to do? Did he do it just to be helpful? Did he do it to get a reward? Did he do it because he didn't have anything better to do? But 1 John 4:9 says, "In this the love of God was manifested towards us, that God sent his only begotten Son into the world that we might live through him." So kind of like us, a little relatability here. Did Jesus come down and do his chores, pick up his stuff? take care of the things that he valued. I mean, we could spend a whole day reading scriptures how Jesus cared for people. Or wash the dishes. Did Jesus come down here and clean things so that we could have a clear conscience towards God? And did Jesus take out the trash? Not saying that the Old Testament was trash, but he did come down here and remove things that were no longer important. And thank goodness that we're no longer under the Old Testament, because the new one is so much better for us. And he provided the new one. So next I moved to a dinner question for my family. I asked them one night, who is the definition of love in your life? A grandparent, a parent, a sibling, a child, etc. And the reason for asking that question was to give them sort of an earthly reflection of Jesus' love. For me, it was my grandpa. He was forgiving, kind, patient, sacrificed a lot for me. Then the next question I asked them is, do you still feel their love? If your loved one that you're thinking about still alive, you know that love requires action. You got to, you want to do things for them. You enjoy when they do stuff for you. But it requires action, and action requires animation. And so if they're still alive, then you can look at Genesis 2:7, where the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. But if the person you picture is deceased, you don't really have those animation actions of being able to tell or communicate or show your love. And you do have a loving memory of them, but I think that's different than an expression of love. And the easiest way I can sort of convey that is a physical hug the same as the memory of a hug? In Ecclesiastes 12:7, it says, the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. But I also asked, is this why death's hard for us? We've got the absence of these actions, and we've got the time of separation. Could be for the rest of your life, or possibly eternity. Then I found myself wondering, is this how God feels when we experience the physical death? I mean, when somebody that we love passes away, and how sad and hard to cope with, I just wonder if that's how God feels when one of his children is lost. And we all know that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And for those who aren't saved, the Bible says that Jesus will come down and separate people on the left and right. And on the left, he'll say, depart from me, you accursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. So then I wanted to do a Bible study this past Wednesday and get started on it. But is there any love in hell? According to the Old Testament, there was Sheol, which was paradise, Hades, and the impassable gulf in between, in the setting for the rich man and Lazarus of Luke 16. And again in the Old Testament, the righteous would be raised to life, and the final judgment and retribution for the paradise people would be raised to righteous life, and for the Hades people, the final judgment and retribution for evil deeds. A horrible destiny of the wicked and irretrievably isolated from the righteous. And so hell in the New Testament is a lake of fire for the wicked, Satan and his henchmen, and it brings an end to their free ways. Jesus says more about hell than any other biblical figure. He portrays it through pictures of Sodom's destruction, fire, burning sulfur, a fiery furnace, weeping, gnashing of teeth, and darkness. And sinners will occupy hell. And hell is where God's wrath culminates. And the objects of his wrath are religious hypocrites, those failing to help the poor, and the vile and murderers. It exists for the compensation of evil deeds. They will be paid back for the evil they have done by the supreme judge, our God. God reestablishes his righteous rule by doing that. And hell is a final place of bondage and isolation from the righteous. The condemned are imprisoned there, so they can't harm God's people anymore, and sinners suffer their penalties. Eternal fire, excluded from God's loving presence, thrown outside into the darkness. The second death basically reduces a person to useless and a ruined existence, where they're like unreasoning animals, and the undying worm has been interpreted as the soul's eternal torment, grieving what has been lost. And regret is compounded, being locked into rebellion. And there are different degrees to hell. Some will be beaten with few blows, and more severe punishment for those entrusted with much. But all this is to say that hell is real just like heaven is real. And it's the opposite. Heaven's happy, hell's depressed. Heaven's loving, hell's isolated. Heaven's life, and hell is death. So, do we fear love? I was told in the Bible that fear is often exchanged for the word respect. So do we really respect love, and do we respect the loss of love? A recent discussion with a longtime friend of mine this past month is the reason why I wanted to study do a study on hell. Because he accepts going to hell with the old saying of "it is what it is." And that saying "it is what it is" really just a cop-out. It basically is a life view that says this situation is too challenging and frustrating for me, and it also discourages responsibility and learning from failure. But I teared up, to be honest, because at the time of our discussion, the fire and brimstone and whipping and gnashing of teeth didn't carry enough weight to even attempt to change his mind. His reply were that these were my beliefs. You know, he believes in God and Jesus, but he's more of a scientific man and believes in scientific history. But we've got 23 feet of poster out there that shows that this Bible is a book of history, not just speculation. And you either believe the Bible in its entirety or you don't. His next statement was that I'm no better than anybody else. And I thought about this for a long time. But are Christians better than others? I mean, I know we're taught to be humble, but, I thought to myself, as a Christian, I think we are better than other people. I mean, if we put on Jesus, we're better off for sure. But the more that we look and act and treat others like Jesus, isn't that really better than most people that are out there under their own selfish intentions? And ultimately, isn't it better to be saved rather than lost? And after our discussion, I saw a short story where a preacher came across what I would call a stoner. He was, smoking weed or whatever, and the preacher invited him to church, and he said, "Well, I'll have to give this up before I start coming to church." And the preacher replied with something I thought was pretty interesting. He said, "Do you get cleaned up before you get in the shower?" And the guy said, "No." And he said, "Well, that's Jesus' job. You come to church like you are, and he will clean you up and remove things from your life that he feels shouldn't be there." Then the next thing that happened recently in my life was a good friend of mine had a house fire this past week on Thursday night. And I went out there, and it's the second house fire that I've actually been through and walked through. But the destruction is just absolutely horrible. I mean, it gutted his whole entire house, all of his possessions, everything he needs for a daily life is just burned up. As soon as you walk up to the door, you see how the wood's all curled up and charcoaled, and the smell of the it was the next day, and the smell was just disgusting. And you stepped or touched anything, you were just covered with a black soot. I mean, it was just, it's hard to describe really, but it just shows you how fire just destroys everything, and it doesn't care. It just eliminates it all. And I was looking at that, and with our recent Bible study and everything else, I thought, man, this isn't much different than a sinner's soul. And that hit me pretty hard, really. And then, sitting there talking to him for a while, in his sleep-deprived eyes, he sat in his Jeep for the last 16 hours looking at the devastation and loss and just the tiredness. And, he's got a wife and kid that lives with him, and just wondering how things are going to move forward from here, and just the depression there. And so that's why I feel like this sermon sort of ties in with Brent's things. Brent's sermons this month. When you think about anxiety and depression and the loss of loved ones, and if you really sit back and think about what hell is, and then I got that picture of an earthly example through the fire of this house, and then seeing the depression that it left him in, that's a lot of the same things of where a lot of these people are headed if we don't do something as a church here. And so when I heard about this, it gave me a super big desire to help, and I think it goes back to love requires action. I could have just gone about my day and been like most other people. That's unfortunate, if the empty hollow, if you need anything, let me know sort of deal. But instead, I guess my close relationship with this guy pushed me, and it was like, I'm going to do something, and I thought about leaving a donation bucket at the register of the lunch line at cashier, and of course that had to be approved, and it was denied because it might set a precedence. And isn't that really like society today? I thought to myself, I see their side, then there'll always be a bucket there to help somebody out. But thinking about it, what better precedence could there be that if a man lost his house, that people were there willing to step up and donate for him, to help him out, to help save him, to show love, And so that just sort of bothered me. But regardless, I decided to do something, and so I walked around and passed the hat for him and went out there and gave it to him. And it was not standing up here saying, look what I did. It's to say that when you really, truly have love for somebody, you're not just going to sit back and let somebody else do it. You're going to take that initiative. And that kind of rolled me into James 2:18. Faith without work is dead. Show me your faith without works, and I'll show you mine faith by my works. And when you think about our Great Commission, Matthew 28:18 through 20 says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And just like Jesus was told to do something, we are too. And we either do it because we want to, or we don't want to, or we simply do it because He said so. And I think, this world today is like a river. It's flowing constantly, and I picture all of us just floating down the river. It's uncontrollable. We can't stop it. That's life. It's never going to stop for us. It's always going to be moving. It's always going to be changing. Yeah, there might be slow currents. There might be fast currents. The water might be shallow. It might be deep. But we're all just floating down this river. And the only thing that's going to lift us up out of this river and keep us from drowning is Jesus. It's like throwing a friend or a coworker or a family member a life preserver. And they put that life preserver on and it pulls them up out of the water. But if you got a life preserver on, all rivers lead to the ocean. So if they're just sitting there floating by themselves, who knows where they're going to end up. Eventually, they could be out in the middle of the ocean. And what good does that really do? They need that rope that's connected to something. And I like to think of that rope as being faith. If you have faith, then you got Jesus lifting you up out of the water and you're connected to a rope of faith. You're going to be trying to pull yourself closer to the shore, and others on the shore are going to be trying to pull you close too. You work together to try to get out of that river of the world and onto the shore. And so that's where we come in. We're on all different Christian walks here. Some of us are struggling just to put our own life preserver on. But does that mean I'm going to let my fellow coworker or family member float down the world and not even tell them that there is a life preserver? Or maybe you're doing exactly what you should be, and you're the church on the rock, and you're helping pull those people in. It takes all of us to help save these lost ones. And like I said when I first got here, it's nice and comforting that I can look out and see all these familiar faces that probably won't make fun of me for stuttering or I got some comfort there that we're all friends here and loving brothers and sisters. But at the same time, it's almost heartbreaking that Sunday after Sunday, there's nobody new to meet. And so I just urge us all to go out there and just picture that fire, or that burn up soul. And if that don't move you to, we every Sunday we come here to get motivated and encouraged to go out and save others. But, is that working? Maybe we need a dose of the because I said so. And again, I'm no better than anybody else sitting out there. At times I'm struggling to put my life jacket on. Sometimes I'm just letting the rope hold me in place for a while. But there's so many souls out there that need us, and we just need to do something a little bit more about it. So not too long today, but thank you for listening, and God bless you.